Welcome. We are looking at Parasha Yitro, of course, a most eventful, fascinating parsha, including the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah itself, perhaps the most dramatic parsha of all. But I'd like to speak about tonight, to share with you a fascinating insight from Rav Moshe Alshikh on the comments of Yitro when he first arrives. So Yitro presents by messenger to Moshe the fact that he has come to bring to Moshe his wife and his two sons as well. That is to say, the grandsons of Yitro, the sons of Tzipporah, and the sons of Moshe. And then when they begin their conversation, so I'd like to pick it up at the very end of page 394. If you're with me in the Stone Chumash, it's near the beginning of Parasha Yitro. It's Perek Yud chapter 18, verse 8, Pasuk Ches. In the Stone Chumash, it's page 394. The very last word. Vayisaper Moshe lechosno es kol asher asa Hashem lefaro lemitzrayim alodos Yisrael. Moshe related to his father-in-law all that Hashem had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians regarding Israel, and that is to say, on the behalf of the Jewish people. And all of the turmoil, all of the travail that befell them along the way, and Hashem saved them. So Moshe, in this pasuk, the Torah summarizes how Moshe explained to Yitro, caught him up, brought him up to date. Yitro heard some of those events, but now he has a first-hand account from Moshe. How does he respond? So let's take a close look at the next pasuk, especially the very first word. Vayichad Yitro al kol hatova asher asa Hashem liYisrael asher hitzilo miyad Mitzrayim. Vayichad Yitro means that Yitro rejoiced regarding all of the goodness that Hashem had done for Israel, asher hitzilo miyad Mitzrayim, that he saved him, that is to say, God saved the Jewish people from the hand of Egypt. The first word, vayichad, is an interesting word. Rashi says, if you take a look at Rashi, if you have facility with Rashi, b'chad Yisro vayismach Yisro zeu pshuto. Rashi says the word vayichad is not such a common word. It means vayismach, and he rejoiced. But maybe because the Torah does not use the word vayismach, which would be quite straightforward, the word vayismach appears, I think I read 150 times. The word vayichad appears only 3 times. So it's an uncommon term for joy. And maybe that's why Rashi also says a medrash agada, which we'll get to that medrash in a moment. But initially, the word vayichad is related to the word chedva. It derives from the word chedva. Chedva means joy. Ruthie has a good friend by the name of Chedva. It's a different name. Anyway, I think she has a friend by the name of Chedva. In any case, we have Gila, Rina, Ditza, V'chedva. And of course, I'm sure you remember in Psukei de Zimra that we say, Oz v'chedva bimekomo. Might and joy are in his place. So the word chedva is found in the Tanakh in a number of places, but the word vayichad is an unusual form of that word. So maybe that's why, as I just suggested, that's why Rashi also proposes a midrashic interpretation. And Rashi says, Umedrash agada, nase besaro chidudim. His flesh became prickly. He had like goosebumps when he heard about how Hashem saved Israel from the Egyptians. Of course, that equally, at the same time, alludes to the downfall of the Egyptians. So Rashi says, Meitzar al ibud Mitzrayim. He was distressed at the downfall of Egypt, the loss of life. Proudly told him about all of the plagues, and then the dramatic crossing of the sea, the drowning of the Egyptians. And Rashi adds on from the Medrash, Hainu da'amri inchi giora ad asara dare, a proselyte until 10 generations, lo tivaza arama ba'ape, do not demean or do not criticize, don't dismiss in a kind of derisive way an Aramean, that is to say, a Gentile in his presence, someone who has descended from Gerim, even generations back. Be conscious, be sensitive to his origins, to his background. And although we may regard a foreign nation as maybe adversaries, antagonists of ours. Perhaps we feel they got what they deserve, but he may have a feeling of identity with those people as well. That's what Rashi says. So Vayichad Yisro means that even though he was joyful on one hand, but at the same time, he was like his hair stood on end at hearing about the misfortune that befell the Egyptians. The Chizkuni, okay, perhaps we'll leave that. We started a few minutes there, we'll leave that. Chizkuni has something to say, but let's go on. So that's Rashi's Medrash. I just want to add parenthetically that I saw in Rabbeinu Bachaya many years ago the word Vayichad, because this is a kind of lead in to what we're going to learn from Alshikh ha-Kadosh. But Rabbeinu Bachaya says that Vayichad is an expression of Yichud, that is to say that he identified with the experience of the Jewish people. Yitro, as we know, is the first, using the contemporary expression, Jew by choice, the first one that we find in the Torah who comes to join the Jewish people. There were other distinguished proselytes after him. Yitro is the first of them. So Vayichad Yitro, that he identified with the Jewish people. The dramatic rescue, redemption of the Jewish people was something that he identified with. So he felt as if the experience of the Jewish people, your joy is my joy. That's how Rabbeinu Bachai explains. That's why I didn't just say Vayismach, it says Vayichad, to hint to the idea that Yisro rejoiced with the joy of the Jewish people. Your joy is my joy. But now I want to tell you what Ramosha Alshikh says, a very profound approach. He says that perhaps we can synthesize, let's use that word, we can harmonize the pshat and the drash. The pshat is he rejoiced. The drash is that his hair stood on end, his flesh became prickly, he got goosebumps overhearing the devastation that befell the Egyptians. So he says like this, that Yisro rejoiced only at the redemption of Israel. It says, Vayichad Yisro al kol hatova asher asa Hashem liYisrael. He rejoiced over the goodness that Hashem did for Israel, but he did not feel any sense of schadenfreude, any sense of joy at the comeuppance of the Egyptians. So whereas the Jewish people may have delighted in seeing the punishment meted out to the Egyptians after decades and generations of torturous, sadistic oppression, the Jewish people may have felt a sense of vindication to see Mitzrayim finally get what they richly deserved, but Yisro didn't see it that way. He rejoiced at the deliverance of Israel, but not at the suffering, not at the downfall of Mitzrayim. And he says, he quotes a medrash, that the medrash says, actually we'll get to that in one moment, he says that we find, if you look very closely at the language of the pasuk, it says, he saved him from the hand of Egypt. So Ramosha Alshikh asks, why not simply say Asher Hotzio me Eretz Mitzrayim? Why does it have to Hitzilo to save them? The main thing is the departure. They left Egypt. God extricated them from Egypt. He took them out of the land of Egypt. We know this as the Exodus. We speak about Yitzias Mitzrayim. We don't talk about Hatzala mi Mitzrayim. Now, it is true that the Torah does say V'hitzalti. It's one of the four famous expressions of redemption. But if you're going to use one word, one verb to describe what Hashem did vis-a-vis the Jewish people and Egypt, the one word is potzi. He took them out of the land of Egypt. Why does it Miyad Mitzrayim? Wasn't the main thing shouldn't be the grip of Egypt. The main thing should be he took them out from the land of Egypt, and in that sense they were freed. They couldn't leave before that. Now they can leave, or Hashem enabled them to leave. Hashem took them out. It's Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why does he use the word Asher Hitzilo Miyad Mitzrayim? And look at the next passage. V'ema Yisro Baruch Hashem Asher Hitzileschem Miyad Mitzrayim. He emphasizes, the Torah repeats it really. in quoting him, he says, who saved you from the hand of Egypt, from the grip of Egypt, Umiyad Paro, and from the hand of Pharaoh, Asher Hitzilas Ha'am mitachas yad Mitzrayim, again, who has saved the people from under the hand of Egypt. So Rav Moshe Alshikh says that quotes the Medrash Tanchuma. The Medrash Tanchuma says that the word Vayichad, Vayichad Yisro, Sheyiched Shmo Shel ha-Kadosh Baruch, that he acknowledged the unity of God's name. What does that mean? Sheyiched Shmo. Like we say at the end of Aleinu, B'yomahu Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. There'll be one God and one name. Yiched Shmo is a way of saying, you emphasize the oneness of God. There's no multiplicity. There's one God. Says the Alshikh, Miyad Mitzrayim, he explaining, like elaborating upon this medrash. He says, Miyad Mitzrayim means from under, not just the hand of Pharaoh, but listen closely, from the grip of the guardian angel of Egypt. He says repeatedly, many times he says in his parish, that the experience of the Jewish people under the subservience, the subjugation of Egypt was not only political slavery, political bondage, it was psychological and it was spiritual. The Jewish people were under the heavy yoke of the Sar of Mitzrayim, of the guardian angel of Mitzrayim. That is to say, the feeling of being dependent upon, being at the mercy of the angel of Egypt, the celestial representative of Mitzrayim. And he quotes this, as I say, in more than one place, when it says, when Hashem says, Va'ereid lahatzilo miyad Mitzrayim, I will go down to save him from the hand of Egypt. It doesn't just mean from the hand of the Egyptians, it means from the hand of the guardian angel of Egypt. It says regarding the song of the sea, just before that, Vayosha Hashem bayom hahu es Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim. God saved Israel from the hand of Egypt. It doesn't say even in the plural, miyadei Mitzrayim. It says, Vayar Yisrael es Mitzrayim meis al sfas hayam. It doesn't say meisim, they were dead in the plural, the corpses of the Egyptians. It says, Mitzrayim Mace, says the Medrash, it refers to the guardian angel of Egypt that had perished. Hashem triumphed over, Hashem humbled and obliterated the Sar of Mitzrayim. Now, this is not only a figure of speech, it's also a way of saying that the Jewish people were themselves, because of their downtrodden spiritual and psychological state, the Jewish people regarded themselves as beholden to Pharaoh and beholden to the Sar of Mitzrayim. So when it says Vayichad Yisro, Yisro rejoiced at the fact that Hashem took the Jewish people, he saved them, he extricated them from the grip of the influence of the Egyptian paganism. I think that there's a remez here to the fact that Yisro was himself, as the Torah says explicitly, Kohen Midian. He was an idolatrous priest in his own previous life, in his own career. He was a priest of Midian. He was a sheikh, but he was a religious appointment. And Yisro understood a lot about idolatry, and he understood the attraction of it, and he understood the vacuousness of it. But he also understood the power. And therefore, when Yisro Vayichad, when he acknowledged the oneness of God, he celebrated the fact that the Jewish people were also able to emerge from the heavy burden of the dependence on Sarah Shel Mitzrayim. And he says that's why it says Asher Hitzilo. It wasn't just a geographical relocation. He took them out of Egypt. That's true at one level, but at a deeper level, he celebrated that the Jewish people were saved from the grip of the guardian angel, who represents like the celestial power that is the like a heavenly force that controls Egypt and controls the Jews in Egypt as well. He celebrated the fact that they were extricated from it. And then he has a beautiful diuk in the next pasuk. In pasuk Yud, Yisro, Baruch Hashem asher tzil aschem miyad Mitzrayim miyad Paro. Blessed is God who has saved you from the hand of Egypt, from the hand of Pharaoh. But then he says in the second half of the pasuk, the last words, Asher hitzil es ha'am, who saved the people mitachas yad Mitzrayim. So it's interesting. Again, prima facie, it's just the same, saying the same thing in two different ways. The first half of the verse and the second half are saying the same thing, which is a common biblical formula, actually. It's not at all unusual. But at the same time, there must be some nuance of meaning to it. Why is it that at first he says, who saved you from the hand of Egypt, from the hand of Pharaoh? And then he says, who saved the people, the nation, from under the hand of Egypt. So he says, when he says the words, Hitzil Eschem, who saved you, he means you, Moshe, Aharon, the elders, the distinguished, the elite of the Jewish people. So he saved you, but you were in the hand of Mitzrayim. However, the second half of the verse, the Am, that is to say, the Hoi Paloi, the Hamon Am, the masses of the Jewish people, mitachas yad Mitzrayim, from under the hand. What's the difference? He says that like a king might kidnap a person or take slaves, take captives. They're members of another nation and he has captured them. And then maybe he's forced to release them. But there can be another group of people who are native to that land and they've always been a slave caste for generations. So the second group who are redeemed, it's more dramatic. It's more of a transformation. The first group, they never really belonged there in the first place. They were just held captive. But the second group, those who are from a slave population, generation after generation, so when that group is taken out, for them, it's a brave new world. It's astonishing. So therefore, he says that psychologically, spiritually, Moshe and the people in his circle, even those who were enslaved in Egypt, but they represent the higher level, those who they never bought in to the spiritual domination of Egypt. They never were part of that group about whom it says the Egyptians are idolaters and the Jews are also idolaters. But the second group, which is probably the larger group, the Am, the people at large, so then it's mitachas yad Mitzrayim. They were under the subjugation of the Sar Mitzrayim. And he quotes the pasuk, which the Medrash quotes also. We have in Devarim, Goy mikerev Goy. Hashem took out a nation from within a nation. We mentioned it here in the past as well, weeks ago. Goy mikerev Goy. That is to say, halalu of the avarazara, halalu of the avarazara. That the Jewish people also were a nation similar to the Egyptians. The Jews were like completely subservient and subsumed within the culture of Egypt. And that is the Am. So that's mitachas yad Mitzrayim. That's how he explains the nuance of difference. So Yitro celebrated by Yichad Yisro. He was joyous, he was happy, and he said that the joy is with the escape of the Jewish people. I'm delighted at the victory, the triumph of the Jewish people. I'm not necessarily celebrating the suffering and the downfall of the Egyptians. But what's really remarkable, he says, is Asher hitzil eschem miyad Mitzrayim, that Hashem has enabled you to escape the slave mentality and the feeling of subservience to the guardian angel of Egypt. And that is especially remarkable for the Am, Asher hitzil ha'am mitachas yad Mitzrayim. I'd like to suggest something further here as well, and this is my own speculation. The idea of the Jewish people being subservient to the Sar of Mitzrayim does not necessarily preclude their appreciation of the miracles that God wrought for them as well. But Yitro said there is a yichud here, there is a oneness that has to be emphasized. I think there may be an allusion here in the part of Alshikh to repudiate the error of dualism, what's called shituf, the notion that God, the God of Israel, let's say, is great, but there are other gods around that also have some influence, also have some power, also have a role to play. They also exercise some control over human affairs. This is the error known as shituf. Shituf, like from the word shutaf, which is a partnership. That God has a partnership. That God maybe is the senior partner, but he's got some junior partners as well. And the reason that this, to me, is quite interesting is that, remember that Rav Moshe Alshikh was born in 1508, and his parents were exiled from Spain in 1492, and Alshikh would have known many, many people who were either presently or previously subject to kissing the cross, who would have submitted to baptism, and who would have maybe subsequently left and escaped from Spain, or perhaps still remained that way, still remain caught in that status of what's known as new Christians or crypto Jews. I think that he is highlighting the fact that Yitro, from his perspective of being a theologian, of appreciating polytheism and having repudiated polytheism, he is rejoicing at the remarkable achievement of the Jewish people. I should say achievement, the beneficence of Hashem in extricating the Jewish people from that belief, even a shared belief in Saro Shel Mitzrayim, the guardian angel of Egypt. And Yitro, who himself had sampled all of the idolatrous possibilities, is celebrating, and that would well explain why the Torah uses the word, why he used the word vayich, the Torah used the word vayichad Yisrael, because of the emphasis on the oneness of Hashem, and the Jewish people are no longer, they've been saved from that error. And by the way, that error lingers a long time, because even Christianity itself, according to many Jewish thinkers, falls foul of that principle of shituf, because yes, it is a derivative of the Torah, in the sense that the Christian Bible is somehow like a second version or a companion volume or something like that. But of course, therein lies the theological heresy, because the Torah doesn't need a second coming and a second companion and a sort of companion volume. That is the error of shituf. Now I want to even add a footnote to my speculation, and to remind you that a friend told me that his son was just in Israel. He visited Tzfat, and he went to see the kever of Rav Moshe Alshikh. And that is in the famous Beis HaChaim, the cemetery in Tzfat, and you can visit there the kever of many, many great people from the golden age of Tzfat, of which Alshikh was one of the leading personalities. He was a disciple, for 50 years, a disciple of Rav Yosef Karo, and he succeeded Rav Yosef Karo as the Av Beis Din of Tzfat after the author of the Shulchan Aruch passed away in 1575. And Rav Moshe Alshikh lived until 1593, and he succeeded him. It also says on his kever that Rav Moshe Alshikh was a musmach of Rav Yosef Karo. Now, let me explain what that means. It doesn't just mean that he gave him a faher and he wrote out a smicha document. He could put it on his wall and his wife can kvel. That's what I did years ago. But Rav Moshe Alshikh, it means that he had smicha from the effort to revive the smicha. Now, we don't have time in the 3 minutes we have left to talk about that at length, but suffice to say, this was a bold and ambitious and dramatic and controversial enterprise to try to reestablish the process of ordaining great Torah leaders from generation to generation, which had lapsed about 1,000 years before, more than 1,000 years before. when it says Moshe kibel Torah Sinai and he ordained Yehoshua, etc., generation after generation, that continued until the age of the Tanaim, and then it lapsed. They wanted to reinstate it, and it had a messianic objective as well, and had other significance also. This was the project of Rav Yaakov Bei Rav. Rav Yaakov Bei Rav was the Av Beis Din before Rav Yosef Karo came to town. Rav Yaakov Bei Rav had this campaign, this idea of reestablishing the smicha. It did not go down well with the sages in Yerushalayim, of whom the leading sage in Yerushalayim at that time was called Mahari ben Leib. I'm sorry, Mahari ibn Chaviv. No, Reb Leib, I got it wrong. Levi ibn Chaviv, Ralbach. He was the Av Beis Din in Yerushalayim, and Rav Yaakov Bei Rav wrote him a smicha certificate and he sent it to him. And he thought in this way he would win his favor. Well, it backfired. Reb Levi ibn Chaviv did not think much of Reb Yaakov Bei Rav or of his smicha or the whole enterprise. And he responded in a very forceful, negative way. Reb Yaakov Bei Rav could give as well as he took, maybe even more so. And he wrote back in a very sharp way, and he alluded to the fact that Reb Levi ibn Chaviv had changed his name. He said, I never changed my name. I've served God all my life. I never even changed my name. That was an allusion to the fact that at the age of 17, Reb Levi ibn Chaviv had lived as a Christian in Portugal, because he had submitted to baptism at the hands of King Manuel of Portugal. And for a year, at the age of 17, he lived as a Christian, at least outwardly, until he could escape to Salonika, and he became one of the great Gedolim of the generation, among the greatest. The Alshikh was part of that generation, and he did receive smicha from, Rav Yosef Karo received smicha from Rav Yaakov Bei Rav, and Rav Yosef Karo gave smicha to Rav Moshe Alshikh. And although he doesn't refer, I have not seen him refer to it. I've learned about 620 pages of his Parush so far this year. We've learned it together from Bereshis. And I haven't seen any reference to it, but maybe this is a remez kal in which he speaks about yichud, about the excoriating, rejecting it, repudiating the idea of shituf, and exalting the achdus, the oneness of God. So this is my theory. We've had about 25 minutes of Alshikh and about 5 or 6 minutes of Rashi Simon speculation, which you can take it or leave it as you like. Thank you again for listening, and I wish everybody a good Shabbos.